Have you ever thought that a simple act of stopping a bus could completely change someone's life? Imagine the scene. A driver going about his routine, driving through busy streets, paying attention to traffic and the clock, when something unexpected catches his attention. At the side of the road, amid the hustle and bustle of cars and people, a small child appears alone, staring blankly, teary-eyed, and trembling with fear. There's no one nearby who seems responsible for him, no adult to offer protection. Just that moment of vulnerability exposed to everyone who passes by without noticing. And it's in that moment that the story you're about to experience begins to take shape. The driver could have driven on, pretending not to see, as so many have done. After all, he was on duty, carrying dozens of passengers, had schedules to meet and routes to respect. But instead, he made a decision that would change not only that child's life, but also his own journey. This simple, seemingly small gesture was capable of awakening profound emotions and revealing hidden truths about courage, compassion, and humanity. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you in ways you never imagined. When we talk about acts of kindness, we often think of grand feats, of stories that seem far removed from our reality. But the truth is that transformation begins in the details, in those moments when someone chooses to act when they could simply ignore it. The driver, by slamming on the brake and stopping the bus, showed that courage isn't measured by the magnitude of the risk, but by the willingness to put others first. Have you ever been there? Ever witnessed a scene where someone's unexpected gesture completely changed the course of a day? This is exactly the kind of experience that makes us believe there are still people willing to save lives, even when no one expects it. The lost child wasn't just afraid. Her expression bore the fragility of someone who doesn't know where to go, the insecurity of being alone in a world that seems too big. And at the same time, the driver carried within him something few noticed, a heart attentive to the needs of those around him. Perhaps it was intuition, perhaps it was simply humanity in its purest form, but he couldn't turn away, and that's precisely where the great lesson lies. The impact of small gestures goes far beyond what we can calculate. Sometimes, all it takes is a watchful eye, a pause in the rush, for a destiny to be transformed forever. As many passengers watched, some questioning the delay, others simply silent, the scene transformed into something they would never forget. The driver approached the child, crouched down to his level, offered reassurance, and held out his hand. This seemingly simple act carried within it the weight of a powerful choice: to leave no one behind. And that is the central point of this inspiring story that we will follow together. But there's something else that makes this episode even more impressive. The driver could never have imagined who the child's parents were. And it's in this detail, this upcoming revelation, that everything takes on new meaning. Because it wasn't just a rescue, but an unexpected encounter that would bring to the surface emotions, surprises, and even reflections on how the decisions we make in seconds can reverberate forever. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what is to come will show that in a world where so many choose to look only at themselves, there are still real stories that rekindle faith in humanity and remind us that every gesture counts. As we delve deeper into this story, it's impossible not to feel a pang in our chest and, at the same time, a renewed sense of hope. Because when we see someone like this driver interrupt their routine to save a lost child, we're reminded that life is made of choices, and the most powerful of them almost always involve generosity and courage. This is the kind of gesture that deserves to be remembered, talked about, and shared. And that's why I want to invite you to be part of this conversation. If this topic resonates with you, Leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Sharing your experience or even a similar moment you've witnessed can inspire others to believe that kindness still exists and can transform destinies. And since we're building a community together that values real and moving stories, your like is also essential. It's not just a sign that you enjoyed it, but a way to show YouTube that this content deserves to reach more people who might need a message like this today. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more hearts with stories of humanity and compassion. And if you want to continue following this kind of content, full of reflection, emotion, and hope, subscribe to the channel. It's this connection that allows us to walk together, discovering and sharing stories that change the way we see the world. Because every comment, every like, and every subscription is more than a number. It's a link that keeps alive the flame of messages that truly matter. Now, returning to our story, what happened after this initial moment brought even more emotion and unexpected revelations, and that is what we will continue talking about. The engine purred amid the city noise, and the steering wheel seemed a natural extension of the driver's hands. It was another day like so many others, one where routine dictates the pace, people rushing to work, students hurriedly climbing the bus steps, seniors occupying the front seats in search of some peace and quiet. Heavy traffic stretched like an endless snake through the streets, and the sound of horns competed with the babble of conversations inside the vehicle. Life continued as it was, and nothing seemed to indicate that today would be any different. The driver, accustomed to this daily routine, steered his bus with a mixture of patience and agility. His attentive eyes shifted between the rear-view mirror and the congested horizon. At each stop, a small scene unfolded before him. An exhausted worker taking advantage of the seat to close his eyes for a few minutes, a mother trying to hold her child's restless hands, a young woman lost in her headphones. This was a portrait of urban life, full of haste, fatigue, and small stories that often go unnoticed. And the curious thing is that for those who live this routine every day, everything seems almost automatic. The bus stops, the doors open, new passengers board, some get off, and the cycle repeats dozens of times until the end of the line. It's as if life were a movie on loop, where the driver plays the same role, scene after scene, without major changes to the script. But the truth is that behind this apparent normality, the unexpected may be about to appear, and when it arrives, it changes everything irreversibly. As the clock ticked by and the driver focused on meeting the deadline, everyday matters might have crossed his mind: bills to pay, dinner at home, or even a memory of a conversation with a family member. This is the kind of behind-the-scenes experience we rarely consider when we look at someone we consider just part of a larger machine. But in reality, each person has their own journey, their own daily decisions, their own fears, and their own small victories. Now imagine the scene, the crowded bus, the stuffy air, and that rush that seems to overwhelm everyone. Nothing stands out until, suddenly, something out of the ordinary happens. It's in that moment that the ordinary gives way to the extraordinary, revealing hidden truths about who we truly are when the unexpected calls us to action. Because deep down, it's not the uniform or the job that defines someone, but rather the choices they make in moments when life demands courage. And the most fascinating thing is realizing how these true stories have the power to transform us. A simple act can break the monotony of routine, break the cycle of haste, and teach us lessons of humanity that no book or speech could convey with the same power. This is the impact that emerges when everyday life meets the unexpected. The revelation that even in the most mundane tasks, there is room for gestures that forever mark the memory of all who witness them. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what seemed like just another work shift with predictable stops and hurried faces, was about to turn into an unexpected journey that would change not only the path of that driver, but also that of a child and everyone who would hear this story later. It's at this point that the routine breaks down and the extraordinary begins to reveal itself. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The driver followed his route as he would any other day, keeping a close eye on the traffic, the passengers boarding and unboarding, but suddenly something broke his routine. There, at the side of the road, a small figure caught his eye. A child, alone, with no adult around, standing on the shoulder with a lost look in his eyes, seemed to carry a deep fear and confusion that belied the innocence of childhood. The driver's heart raced. He knew this scene wasn't just an ordinary detail along the way. It was a silent cry for help. Amidst the rush of everyday life, where so many pass by without noticing the signs around them, he saw something that many would overlook. The child's expression betrayed more than just being lost. There was something about her huddled body, her hands clutching her small coat, that revealed vulnerability. It was as if the world had stopped to show the driver that, in that moment, his mission went far beyond getting people from one point to another. It was about compassion, about choices that define destinies. Every passenger watched out the window curiously, but no one yet knew what was about to happen. The silence inside. The bus was broken by the sudden screech of the brakes as the driver decided to stop. This kind of decision may seem small, almost automatic, but it's actually the result of a mindset focused on caring for others. How many would have noticed that child? How many would have had the courage to interrupt the rush of an ordinary day to care? The transformation of that moment began precisely with the breaking of a pattern in the contrast between the impersonal flow of traffic and the human gesture. That emerged unexpectedly. Opening the door, the driver took a deep breath, aware that he didn't know what he would find. Maybe it was just a child who had lost sight of his parents for a few minutes. Maybe it was something more serious. But deep inside him, he was certain. Ignoring was not an option. And this is where the story gains strength, the hidden truth that the impact of our everyday choices can transcend any routine. It's not just about driving a bus or keeping to a schedule, but about seeing the hidden opportunities to make a difference. With each step toward the child, the tension grew. Passengers craned their necks for a better look. Some murmured worriedly, others simply watched in silence. What was at stake was not only the fate of a lost child, but also the revelation of how small gestures can trigger major consequences. Behind the scenes, displays of courage, compassion, and humanity were revealed before everyone present. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what seemed like just stopping a bus could actually have a much greater impact than anyone imagined at the time. It wasn't just about finding a child, it was about awakening an entire community to the value of empathy and paying attention to others' cues. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The driver knew that every minute of delay would be met with impatient glances, complaints, and even potential problems with the company. But given what he saw before him, none of that seemed to matter. The lost child wasn't just a detail in the landscape. It was a silent call that touched something deep within him. The noise of the engine, the muffled conversations on the bus, everything seemed to disappear for an instant when he made the decision to stop. He slammed on the brake and felt the weight of the choice fall upon his shoulders because, more than a break from routine, it was an act of courage that broke with the hurried logic of an ordinary day. Many passengers glanced at each other. Some frowned impatiently, but others sensed in the driver's serious expression that there was something more at stake than haste. This is the kind of moment when mindset reveals itself. What for some is just a setback For others is a chance to make a difference, and he steadfastly chose not to turn his face away from the problem. Courage lies not only in facing great dangers, but also in making difficult decisions when no one expects you to. The driver felt the tension of responsibility because inside the bus there were dozens of people trusting him, but outside there was a fragile life crying out for help without words. And in this dilemma, he chose humanity. It's curious how, in situations like this, the hidden truth of his character comes to light. He could have continued on his way, pretending he didn't see it, justifying his haste with seemingly valid reasons. But something inside him screamed that if he didn't stop, he might spend the rest of his life wondering what had happened to that child. This decision demonstrated the impact that small gestures can have, because it wasn't just about stopping a bus, but about interrupting indifference. The passengers who had previously been in a hurry began to realize the seriousness of the scene. Some craned their necks to see the child, others murmured about the danger of leaving her there alone. Gradually, the mood shifted, and impatience was replaced by anticipation. It was as if everyone were being pulled out of the mechanical routine and invited to reflect on what truly matters. The driver, his hands firm on the steering wheel, took a deep breath before opening the door. He knew he was entering unfamiliar territory, but this was the essence of his journey, choices that transform, even if they carry risks. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the decision to stop was not just a reflection of momentary compassion, but the revelation of a hidden value, that of placing the human above the stopwatch, the heart above the machine, and remembering that courage often is choosing the path that no one else would have the courage to take. Right there. I'm on this journey too. The driver descended the bus steps with firm steps, but inside his heart was beating fast. Before him stood the child, small, teary-eyed, clothes a little disheveled, and her body curled up as if seeking protection. The frightened look revealed much more than words could say. When he approached, the first reaction was to recoil. The child took a step back as if afraid to trust any adult. That moment was filled with silence, a heavy silence that seemed to scream the vulnerability of that fragile life. The driver, realizing the delicacy of the situation, didn't rush. He knew that at that moment, more than haste, he needed to convey security. In a calm voice, he bent down to the child's level and said, "It's okay, I'm here to help you." These simple words, spoken with sincerity, began to break through the invisible barrier of fear. Tears streamed down the small face, and the answer came through sobs. I don't know where my parents are." This outburst, filled with pain, was not just a sentence, but a desperate plea for someone to welcome him. The driver felt the weight of responsibility increase, but also an unshakable clarity about what he needed to do. The scene caught the attention of those on the bus, who watched through the window with wide eyes. It was as if, suddenly, everyone realized that this moment transcended the ordinary. It wasn't just a driver meeting a child, it was the embodiment of an encounter that had the power to change destinies. The fear was still present, but it had already given way to a thread of trust, the kind that arises when someone shows genuine care. This initial exchange revealed the hidden truth about the power of empathy. It's not about solving everything immediately, but about offering a safe haven amidst the chaos. The driver, without regard for protocols or rigid rules, followed the purest human instinct to protect. And this seemingly simple choice carried a profound impact, because in that moment, he wasn't just a professional doing his job, but someone willing to stop the rush to embrace someone's pain. What was most striking was the child's open vulnerability. The short words, the tear-filled eyes, the withdrawn gestures. All of this painted a picture of loneliness that could not be ignored. And deep down, it sparked in each viewer a reflection on how often life presents us with situations in which we must decide whether to lend a hand or move on as if nothing had happened. This was the essence of the transformation taking place there. The revelation that courage also means listening, wiping away tears, and offering presence. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this encounter was not just an isolated episode, but the beginning of a journey where both the driver and the child would carry lessons that would transform their lives forever. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The driver remained kneeling before the child, and in that simple gesture there was immense power. It wasn't just the physical position, but what it communicated. I'm at your level, I see you, I recognize your pain. This choice to lean in wasn't automatic. It was the result of a mindset shaped by empathy, by the ability to put oneself in another's shoes in moments of fragility. The child's eyes, still brimming with tears, began to find in the driver's eyes something they'd been missing until then: reassurance. There was a hidden truth there, a silent revelation that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't running or screaming, but remaining calmly present in the midst of chaos. The driver's hands didn't immediately grasp the child. He knew trust isn't imposed, it's earned. Instead, he slowly extended his open palm, without pressure, a gentle invitation that spoke louder than 1,000 words. You can trust me when you're ready. This gesture, as simple as it seemed, carried a profound impact. It was the visible expression of kindness, the kind of action that transforms a moment of despair into a step toward hope. And it was in this meaningful silence that the child hesitantly let out a sob, and almost without realizing it, moved a little closer. The surrounding environment seemed suspended. The passengers watching through the window were mesmerized, as if witnessing something rarely seen amidst the daily rush. A human being making space for another to exist with dignity. This pause in time, this instant when nothing else mattered but genuine connection, revealed the power of small decisions. Decisions that may seem invisible, but which carry the power to change entire trajectories. The driver's posture was that of someone who knew that words weren't enough. He needed to convey calm with his body, his tone of voice, and his serene gaze. The child, sensing this care, began to utter short sentences, almost whispers, revealing his fear and loneliness. The driver listened without interrupting, without rushing, because he understood that, in that moment, the greatest gift he could give was precisely the space for that pain to be expressed. This kind of attitude isn't learned from manuals. It arises from a conscious choice to value humanity above rushing. And as the minutes passed, what was once a scene of despair began to transform into something else, a journey of trust being built before everyone's eyes. There was no thunderous heroism or rehearsed words. There was only the authenticity of a pure gesture. This leads us to reflect on how often we experience situations where haste prevents us from truly seeing the other person. How often we miss opportunities to be instruments of calm in the midst of the storm. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happened next showed that this initial connection was just the gateway to even more powerful revelations, which would change not only that child's day, but also the life of the driver and everyone who witnessed the scene. Right there. I'm on this journey too. Inside the bus, the atmosphere was one of contradiction. On one side, there were anxious glances at their watches, passengers muttering quietly about missed appointments, delayed meetings, and scheduled doctor's appointments. Routine didn't wait, and for many, that delay felt like another burden on the day's long list of difficulties. But on the other side, there were teary eyes, people silent, absorbing the scene of a driver who dared break protocol to reach out to a lost child. It was as if the entire bus had become a mirror of society, Some caught up in the rush and immediacy, others touched by the profound impact of an unexpected act of kindness. This division exposed a hidden truth about our collective mindset, how difficult it still is for us to slow down and see what truly matters. As the still frightened child stood near the driver, some passengers began to murmur words of encouragement. A woman in the front remarked that this was the kind of gesture that showed humanity still had salvation. A young man, initially irritated, removed his headphones and silently observed the scene, perhaps reflecting on how many times he had ignored someone in need because he was in too much of a hurry. Some even discreetly recorded the scene on their cell phones, not only to share later, but as if to preserve the memory as a living reminder that compassion could still be found amidst the urban chaos. The driver, for his part, seemed unfazed by the criticism or praise. His gaze was firmly fixed on the child, his attention fully focused on offering reassurance and calm. This detail revealed something greater. When empathy speaks louder, external voices of haste, judgment, and demands lose their weight. There, in that moment, he made a decision that revealed more about his mindset than any speech, to put a child's life above the collective rush. And this, for some, was an uncomfortable revelation. After all, how often, in the rush of life, do we fail to act for others in the name of our own agenda? This tension between criticism and support was, paradoxically, what made the moment even more powerful. Because it wasn't just one child being helped, it was an entire group of people being confronted with the stark truth that small gestures can have immeasurable impact. For some, it would be forgotten the next day, swallowed up by routine. For others, it would be a silent lesson, a reminder that it's possible to make decisions that change someone's journey, and our own too. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the passenger's reaction wasn't just an immediate reflection of emotion or impatience. It opened the door to something bigger, an internal debate within each of them about what humanity truly means in everyday life. It was a moment when invisible shadows were revealed. Haste versus compassion, selfishness versus solidarity. The fear of wasting time versus the courage to offer time. The simple act of stopping the bus brought to light revelations about how we deal with life-changing choices, showing that even in ordinary situations, there are decisions capable of revealing what's most human or cold in us. And here, I want to ask you, have you ever witnessed a situation where someone chose empathy over haste? If so, comment, "That makes sense to me." The silence that fell inside the bus seemed to carry a greater weight than the honking of traffic outside. The driver, still kneeling, took a deep breath before asking the question that could unlock the truth hidden behind that frightened look. In a calm, unhurried voice, he asked the child, "Where are your parents?" The answer came in fragments, almost a whisper laden with vulnerability. The girl could barely string words together, only stammering between sobs. "Aichun got lost." This confession, so simple and so devastating at the same time, completely changed the atmosphere. Suddenly, the scene ceased to be merely a delay and became a moment of profound impact on the lives of everyone present. For the passengers, hearing those 3 words came as a shock. Some of their impatience faded at the exposed vulnerability. It was impossible not to feel the weight of that statement. After all, who has never experienced on some level the feeling of being lost? Not just physically, but lost in decisions, in journeys, on paths that seem to lead nowhere. This child's revelation touched on something universal. The fragility we all carry, and the need to find someone to lend a hand. The driver's gaze remained steady, filled with empathy, demonstrating his willingness to offer more than just a ride. In that moment, he wasn't just a bus driver, but someone taking on, even if temporarily, the responsibility of providing security to a life in need. It was as if the behind the scenes of his own life story had prepared him for this moment, understanding that sometimes you don't need to have all the answers, but rather be willing to be a shelter until they arrive. Some passengers began to shift in their seats, no longer out of impatience, but out of a mix of compassion and curiosity. A mother traveling with her young son approached, offering a tissue to wipe the child's tears. A man quietly commented that the scene reminded him of being lost in a crowded market as a child and how he'd never forgotten the feeling of fear. These spontaneous connections showed that the girl's story was already sparking something greater, transforming strangers into witnesses to a silent learning experience about humanity. The most striking detail, however, was the driver's reaction. He didn't press her for more information, didn't try to extract answers she couldn't give. He simply said, "It's okay, we'll figure it out." These words, simple and firm, acted as a shield against the child's inner chaos. His mindset demonstrated that in times of crisis, emotional security is as vital as physical security. He had made a decision that went beyond his role, to offer reassurance when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this search for answers that often don't come immediately teaches us something powerful. The truth isn't always available when we most want it. Sometimes silence, broken words, or a lack of clarity reveal much more than a complete explanation. It's in these behind-the-scenes moments of life, when we deal with uncertainty, that we have the opportunity to exercise patience, empathy, and resilience. The driver, by accepting the child's limitations without judging them, shows us that the true impact isn't in obtaining all the information, but in creating a safe space for revelation to happen at the right time. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a time when you didn't have all the answers, but chose to be present and supportive? If so, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." Inside the bus, the initial silence gave way to murmurs that gradually transformed into concrete gestures. The tension between haste and patience began to dissolve when a grey-haired woman, who until then had been observing the scene in silence, opened her purse and took out a small bottle of water. With trembling but compassionate hands, she offered it to the child, who hesitantly accepted it with teary eyes. The simple act broke an invisible barrier, reminding everyone that behind the daily rush, there is still room for humanity. Then, a man sitting in the back stood up, took out his cell phone and said firmly, "We need to call the police now." There was no longer that clear divide between those who criticized and those who supported. Gradually, the atmosphere transformed. The climate of judgment gave way to collaboration. And the bus, which moments before seemed merely a hurried transport vehicle, became a space of solidarity, where each passenger wondered how they could help. The driver, who until then had carried the weight of the decision to stop alone, now felt the support of the community forming within the bus itself. It was as if his courage had ignited a spark in each person. The woman who offered water brought the first breath of welcome. The man who spoke about the police brought a sense of responsibility. Other passengers, touched by the gesture, began to take out tissues, offer words of comfort, or simply smile at the child, trying to show that she was no longer alone. The atmosphere was filled with a different energy, something that came not from haste or obligation, but from a collective sense of humanity. This moment shows how, often, it only takes one person to take the first step for others to find the courage to follow. The transformation of that space was visible. The disapproving looks of some turned to compassion. And even those who had been murmuring about delays minutes before now remained in respectful silence, absorbing the importance of that moment. It was as if everyone understood, albeit silently, that they were participating in something greater than a simply interrupted journey. There was a revelation there, the hidden truth, that in situations of vulnerability, the best of humanity can emerge. Children always awaken this protective instinct, but in this case, the vulnerability of the lost and frightened little girl touched the hearts of each passenger even more deeply. A journey that began as a routine of work and commute had become a practical lesson in empathy. Each person's decisions, even small ones, had an impact on the collective. This scene teaches that the behind-the-scenes nature of great acts of kindness often stems from simple details: a bottle of water, a quick phone call, a word of encouragement. The emotional impact was so great that even the looks exchanged between strangers on the bus carried a new layer of understanding, as if they were connected by a shared mission. And that's precisely what makes us reflect on how our mindset can change when we understand that even in chaotic situations, there's room for kindness. The driver was the catalyst, but each passenger in their own way became part of that story. Have you ever experienced a moment when small gestures completely changed the course of a situation? Comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what would come next would show that momentary union on the bus was just the beginning of an even greater revelation. By the time authorities arrived, the scene inside the bus had already transformed into a living portrait of solidarity. Police officers and social workers entered with firm steps, but the look of surprise at the group's unity was evident. The driver quickly explained what had happened, while the child, her small hands still clutching the bottle of water offered by a passenger, seemed to search in every detail for a sense of security she had previously lacked. Tension grew as everyone anxiously awaited the identity of the lost girl's parents. Silence fell again, now charged not with judgment but with anticipation. And then, amidst the commotion, two figures appeared that no one had anticipated. They were familiar faces from the community, but in a completely unexpected context. They weren't distant strangers, but familiar faces whose presence changed the atmosphere almost instantly. The hidden truth emerged as a startling revelation. Those desperate parents had been searching for their daughter for hours, unaware that she had been found by a driver who chose to follow his conscience rather than the rush of the clock. The reunion was marked by tears, hugs, and a collective emotion that ran through every passenger. The revelation had a profound impact, demonstrating how life can change in an instant and how our decisions, even the simplest ones, carry the power to change destinies. The driver, who began the day believing he was simply going about his daily routine, was now seen as a crucial link in a story of reunion and hope. It was as if his choice had illuminated not only the child's life, but also the lives of everyone who witnessed that moment. This kind of revelation makes us reflect on the mindset with which we face the hustle and bustle of everyday life. How many times have we rushed past, ignoring details around us that could hide entire stories? The child alone on the side of the road was a powerful symbol of what we often fail to notice, the vulnerabilities hidden amidst the daily rush. The driver saw this, decided to act, and in doing so, brought about a transformation no one could have foreseen. Behind the scenes of this story, each person on the bus was also transformed. Some may have felt ashamed of their initial impatience, others proud of their contribution, even if only in small gestures. But everyone, without exception, left with an emotional lesson that would be hard to forget. The revelation by the child's parents not only solved a mystery, but also increased awareness that the impact of our actions goes far beyond what we can measure at the time. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic because the way that community reacted after this episode showed that this wasn't just an isolated story, but a collective journey that left lasting marks. Comment there. I'm on this journey too. The parents' arrival was one of those moments that seemed to suspend time. As soon as the mother walked through the bus door, her teary eyes met her daughter's, and the distance between them disappeared in a split second. The embrace that followed was so intense, it seemed to erase the fear, insecurity, and loneliness the child had felt until then. Tears streamed down the mother's face, without restraint, and each sob echoed like a testament to the pain of nearly losing the most precious thing in her life. The little girl, still trembling, clung to her mother's lap with the strength of someone who had finally found her safe haven. The father, arriving close behind, tried to remain steady, but his eyes betrayed the relief and vulnerability of that moment. He stroked his daughter's hair as if to reassure himself that she was truly there, alive, breathing, protected. Ashid. Passengers, previously mere observers of a curious and unexpected scene, now found themselves part of something greater. A story of reunion that carried within it the weight of despair and the lightness of relief. Many wept silently, others applauded, unable to contain their emotion at the strength of the bond of love that was renewed before them. The driver, for his part, remained slightly away, as if unwilling to steal the spotlight in a scene that didn't belong to him. But the mother, still, in tears, didn't let her gesture go unnoticed. With a gesture filled with gratitude, she extended her hand toward him, squeezing it firmly, as if silently conveying all the gratitude that words couldn't express. The driver, a man accustomed to days of routine, chaotic traffic and haste, was now faced with the revelation that his simple choice, stopping the bus to help a frightened child, had changed an entire story. The collective relief inside the bus was palpable. People looked at each other, with a mixture of disbelief and reverence, as if each had just witnessed something they don't see every day. This wasn't just a family reunion, it was living proof that small gestures can have an unimaginable impact, and that, behind the hustle and bustle of life, there are moments that redefine the way we view humanity. This reunion also sparked a silent reflection among the passengers. How often do we ignore signs of someone in need of help out of fear, haste, or indifference? What if no one had noticed the child? What if the driver had decided to keep going? The hidden truth that scene revealed was clear. Seemingly small decisions can be the thin line between tragedy and hope. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because what happened after this reunion showed that gratitude can transform into something even greater, capable of impacting not only that family, but the entire surrounding community. Comment. That resonates with me. The story took on a life of its own. What began as a simple, almost instinctive gesture by a bus driver who decided to stop his route to help a lost child quickly spread beyond the vehicle and spread through the streets, homes, and cell phone screens of an entire city. The first to comment were, naturally, the passengers. Many of them recorded the scene in short videos and shared them on social media, accompanied by emotionally charged captions. Heroes still exist. Today I witnessed something that made me believe in people. Again, within hours, the story was shared in neighborhood groups, on community pages, and even on larger profiles, which embraced the event as a symbol of humanity. The local press soon noticed the impact. Headlines appeared on news portals: "Driver interrupts trip to save lost child," and "An act of kindness that brought the city to a standstill." The contrast was clear. Amid so much news of tragedy and crisis, there was finally a narrative of light, capable of offering a breath of hope. Reporters sought out the driver, witnesses, and even the child's family, searching for every detail of the story. and the more details emerged, the more his image transformed, from an anonymous professional to someone who symbolized courage, responsibility, and empathy. But what was truly striking was the reaction of ordinary people. In conversations at the bakery, in school hallways, in grocery lines, the topic was the same. Some said, "This should be normal, but it seems so rare these days." Others reflected, "Would I have done the same thing in my busy life? Would I have stopped, taken a risk, exposed myself?" The episode opened up space for deep reflections on mindset, decisions, and the hidden truth of how small gestures often have a huge impact. On social media, the journey went viral. Comments poured in, coming from people who hadn't even seen the city where it all happened. One wrote, "This driver reminded me of my father, who always said that helping others is the greatest duty." Another, "This made me want to be better, to pay more attention to the invisible pain of those I pass by every day." There were also personal revelations. People shared how an unexpected act of kindness had changed their trajectory, or how a simple act of support received during a difficult time still resonated years later. This domino effect of inspiration became even more evident when local institutions, schools, and even companies began mentioning the story at meetings, lectures, and events. The driver became a role model in team training sessions, cited as someone who had the courage to interrupt his own journey to begin another, much longer one. He didn't just drive a bus that day, he guided consciousness. He made many people rethink their values, priorities, and even how they view strangers along the way. And perhaps this is where the greatest revelation of this narrative lies. The true power of an act lies not only in the moment it happens, but in the silent transformation it provokes in those who observe from afar. How many passengers got off that bus different? How many readers, upon seeing the news, decided to pay more attention to the next person who crossed their path? How many viewers, upon watching this story now, felt an inner desire to act with more empathy? The collective impact of such a simple gesture is like a stone thrown into a calm lake. The initial impact is small, almost discreet, but the ripples spread without anyone knowing how far they will reach. Today, it was a lost child who found safety. Tomorrow, it could be someone beside you, needing a helping hand. And who knows, at some point, you could be the person who makes a difference. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because behind the glitter of the headlines and the emotion of the moment, there is a background that almost no one notices. How these acts of kindness expose both the society we live in and the individuals who decide to act. Comment. There. That makes sense to me. When we look at the essence of this story, we realize it goes far beyond the visible gesture. A bus driver's decision to stop his vehicle, to face impatient looks, veiled criticism, and the burden of delays, to simply extend a hand to a frightened child, reveals something that cannot be measured in time or money. This is the kind of choice that redefines mindsets and reveals a hidden truth. Often, it is in small gestures that we find the greatness of humanity. Society, accustomed to rushing, to prioritizing deadlines and commitments, was forced to pause for a moment and reflect on the impact of an action. This episode makes it clear that it's not grand speeches, flashy headlines, or planned heroic acts that transform most. It's the unexpected, the genuine, what emerges in the heat of the moment and is born of a deep sense of empathy. A child lost on the side of the road could be ignored by dozens of drivers, but all it took was one who dared to see beyond the rush for her fate to change completely. And it's in this contrast between the ordinary and the extraordinary that the power of small gestures is revealed. The lesson is simple, yet powerful. Helping doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. The driver didn't have specialized rescue training, nor was he famous or influential, but that's precisely why his decision resonated so much. He proved that anyone, anywhere can make a difference when they choose to act responsibly and humanely. This truth reveals something many prefer not to admit. Kindness isn't lost, just hidden behind the rush and indifference. When we observe the impact of this choice, we see that it goes beyond mere assistance. The passengers were confronted with their own conscience, challenged to rethink their priorities. The community, upon learning the story, was touched by a wave of collective inspiration. And even those who merely heard or read about the incident felt, to some extent, the silent, and called to act with more compassion. It is at this point that the lesson becomes universal. When one person allows themselves to stop and see another, they teach without words that we all carry the capacity to be beacons in the darkness. This narrative also shows that responsibility isn't just about fulfilling formal duties, but about embracing the awareness that our choices affect the lives of those around us. The driver could have continued on his way, but he decided to actively participate in a transformation. This decision is a powerful reminder that every daily journey, whether driving a bus, working at a cashier, or simply passing someone on the street, can conceal an opportunity for impact. It's in these invisible corners of routine that the greatest opportunities for change are revealed. And perhaps the most profound lesson of this story lies in the echo it provokes. If such a simple act was capable of moving an entire city, what would happen if each of us began to see beyond ourselves? Life is made of decisions, and each one, even the smallest, carries the potential to transform destinies. This is the hidden truth we so often forget. We don't need to wait for great moments to exercise courage and empathy, because deep down, every everyday moment can be great when guided by compassion. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because true transformation is not just in what happens to the saved child, but in what happens within each heart that has been touched by this story, whether on the bus, in the city, or here as you listen to these words. Right there. I'm on this journey too. This episode not only impacted the life of the child and his family, but also forever transformed the driver's trajectory. Until that day, he was seen as just another ordinary worker, someone who followed schedules and routes amid the daily chaos of traffic. However, after that gesture, perceptions shifted. He ceased to be just a driver who ferried people from one point to another and began to be recognized as someone who brought hope, who brought a powerful revelation about the importance of seeing others. His journey took on new meaning, and the impact of this transformation wasn't limited to the bus or that road. What's striking is how his mindset was also touched. In later interviews or in conversations with co-workers, it became clear that that moment opened his eyes to the hidden truth that everyone carries within them the power to change their destiny. The driver, previously accustomed to living behind the scenes in the city, suddenly found himself at the center of a story that inspired multitudes. Recognition came not only in the form of headlines, but in the eyes of people who, upon boarding the bus, saw in him not only a professional, but also a living example of courage and empathy. This legacy transcended routine. Colleagues began to view him with more respect. Family members felt proud, and even strangers approached him to thank him for the impact his actions had on the community. This recognition demonstrated that life isn't just about formal responsibilities, but about spontaneous decisions that reveal who we truly are. And the transformation that occurred in him was so profound that in some way it also changed his relationship with work, the community, and his own worldview. The truth is that that act triggered something greater. It showed that a person can be both ordinary and extraordinary. The driver didn't seek glory or rewards, but he ended up receiving something far more valuable, the certainty that he had made a difference. This feeling, this flame that ignited within him, became a silent engine that guided him through each new day, reminding him that behind every face that entered the bus, there might be someone in need of just a simple gesture of humanity. It's fascinating to see how a single moment can reshape an entire life. If before he saw himself as just a cog in the machine, he now understood that his journey had a real impact on the transformation of others. This legacy wasn't just personal, it was collective. By being recognized, he inspired other drivers, other ordinary workers, to understand that, even without the spotlight, everyone has the chance to leave a positive mark on the world. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the true greatness of the legacy is not just in the public recognition, but in the way he came to see himself and how his story continued to echo in the hearts that were touched by it. Comment there, that makes sense to me. What this story ultimately shows us is that we don't need superpowers to make an impact. Sometimes all it takes is sensitivity, courage, and a willingness to act when no one else expects it. The driver didn't know that gesture would be remembered by so many people. He didn't imagine that his simple decision would become a symbol of empathy and responsibility. He simply followed his conscience, listening to the inner voice that told him, "Stop and help." This mindset is what separates people who simply pass through life from those who leave deep marks. And here's an important point. Stories like this make us rethink our own choices. How many times do we come across someone in need of help, but the fast pace of everyday life prevents us from stopping? How many opportunities do we miss because we think it's not my problem? The hidden truth is that in these small moments we define much more than we imagine. We shape not only the destiny of others, but also our own character. The driver's journey is a powerful reminder that every act of kindness creates ripples that reach far beyond the present moment. The transformation occurred not only in the life of the child or family, but also in the entire community, which was touched and inspired to reflect on the value of a selfless gesture. The impact wasn't limited to the headlines. It spread like a silent invitation for each of us to become protagonists of stories of courage, humanity, and compassion. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because when we look at examples like these, we understand that this isn't just an isolated event, but a call to change our mindset. Every small gesture can carry within it a revealing truth. The world needs more people willing to act without expecting anything in return. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed the way you see the world? Share your experience in the comments. If this story resonated with you, comment, "I'm on this journey too." And of course, if this message touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to follow other inspiring stories like this one. There's always something new that can transform the way we see life, and I want you to continue this journey with me. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that stories like this aren't just distant tales, but living reminders of how small actions can transform entire destinies. And that's why I want to invite you to continue walking with me. If this content brought you value, made you reflect, or even moved you, take advantage and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories that carry the same power to inspire and renew hope. Please also leave a like, because it shows that this connection between us truly makes sense. And to let me know you stuck it out, comment, "This message was for me." I'd love to see who shares this same sentiment and is on this journey with me. And look, it doesn't stop there. There's a video right here that complements this topic, and I'm sure you'll relate to it. Click and continue with me there.